Hastings College and those who have found this sermon today and this weekly reflection. My name is Reverend Jeremy Wihelmi. I'm an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church USA for the past 9 years and counting. Now I have served as the chaplain at University of the Ozarks in Clarksville, Arkansas, which is also related to the Presbyterian Church, like Hastings. This is my first time to Hastings, and I am grateful for the invitation to be part of this Aspire program. I didn't know Kool-Aid was founded here, but it makes sense why my hotel room, well, not the hotel room, but my hotel had free Kool-Aid to drink as I walked into the hotel. It was great. So thank you for the invite. Friends, today's reflection is based on a text from Matthew's Gospel. This is the 20th chapter, verses 29 through 34. So I will be reading from the Common English Bible. Listen now for God's Word. As Jesus and his disciples were going out of Jericho, a large crowd followed him. When two blind men sitting along the road heard Jesus was passing by, they shouted, "Show us mercy, Lord, Son of David." Now the crowd scolded them and told them to be quiet. But they shouted even louder, "Show mercy on us, Lord, Son of David." Jesus stopped in his tracks and called to them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord, we want to see," they said. Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately, they were able to see, and they followed him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It's a healing story, with Jesus restoring the sight to two blind men. Though just a few verses here, there are some important takeaways in this text that I believe speak to us in these days. Matthew's gospel is all about getting people to realize that the kingdom of heaven, as Jesus liked to say often, the kingdom of heaven wasn't about a place that we go when we die. No, Matthew believed that when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like this, he was talking about the here and now. That it could be lived, felt, experienced in the present, where we are. And not only did Jesus teach this through parables, he also taught it in the ways he did things. Today's text is an example. The blind were examples of societal rejects. They were unclean. They were marginalized. Many in that culture believed that if you had a physical ailment, you were cursed by God. You must have done something wrong in the eyes of God. You must be a sinner. You were pushed to the edges of society because of this ailment. You were less than human. So when the two blind men asked for mercy from Jesus, the crowd scolded them. Because in their eyes, even in their religion, they viewed the blind men as unworthy. But Jesus is Jesus, because he defied all of the ways religion is used to exclude, shame, and ignore. Jesus goes to them and asks what they seek. They wanted to see. And again, Jesus is Jesus, because he has compassion on them and touched their eyes, and they were able to see. Thankfully, I think the vast majority of Jesus followers today believe that physical ailments and disabilities are not because God is cursing people. However, we can still see the crowds who think that they know all things about God, who proclaim their perfect biblical understandings of how the world works. We see followers of Jesus trying to keep people on the margins through shame, guilt, or because of what they believe about God. We have crowds who think they know all and that everything is black and white when it comes to God. And if your beliefs are counter to theirs, well, be prepared to be shunned. Be prepared to be rejected and marginalized. I've heard it, regrettably, from many a preacher who say, if you don't believe, fill in the blank, then you aren't a Christian. Well, thankfully, we don't look at the crowds or self-righteous preachers for guidance. We look to Jesus. Despite the outrage of the crowd, Jesus has compassion. The difference between the crowd and Jesus is that they immediately look upon the blind men with judgment. They look upon the blind men as unworthy simply because of their ailment. But Jesus starts with compassion. And while we may not have to do this with the blind in these days, this does come up when it comes to politics, religious beliefs and practices, social issues, race, gender, sexuality, to name a few. We join crowds quickly. Pick your issue. Sexuality, marriage, abortion, gender identification, and salvation, for a theological one, for example. When we think about these issues, do we approach other people who have different views on them with compassion? Do we approach those we disagree with compassion? You see, if we believe our stance is so righteous that it gives us permission to do to others what the crowd did to the two blind men, Jesus has something to say to us. Compassion. And I love this part of the text. Not only does Jesus have compassion, he does two very important things I don't want you to miss. One, he listens to their story. He doesn't assume. He asks, "What do you need?" "Help us see," they replied. Imagine if he had only listened to the crowds. Then he would have assumed all sorts of things, right? Instead, he took time and listened to the story of those that the crowd wanted to silence. And then two, he touches their eyes to heal them. Now, this story is told in 3 of the Gospels, but it is only in Matthew's Gospel that it says that Jesus touches their eyes. Touch can be an act of compassion and understanding. When we touch, it's intimate. We don't let just anyone touch us. No. There's something powerful that happens when we are able to touch one another. Touch connects us to others. How could you ever hate a blind person once you've touched their eyes? How could you hate another person if you truly take time to listen to their story while holding their hands? It's human nature for us to reach out to touch something or someone to better understand. When we were little, think about this. How did we learn about things? Through touch. We wanted to touch things so much that our parents had to tell us not to touch those things in order to keep us safe sometimes. And at the same time, how can we violate someone in the worst way? Through touch. Touch is powerful. And when used in the right way, it changes our perspective. Author Mark Yaconelli wrote a book a few years back entitled Between the Listening and the Telling, How Stories Can Save Us. In his book, he shares a story about a young woman named Angela. During college, she got a summer internship at Washington, D.C.'s United States Holocaust Museum. After some classes and training, she was assigned to work in the permanent exhibition, which contains artifacts that include photographs, cobblestones from the Warsaw Ghetto, survivors' testimonies, and a full-size rail car used to transport people to Nazi concentration camps. Emotionally, the most powerful room within the permanent exhibit is what is referred to as the shoe room. The shoe room is a low-lit, rectangular space with a narrow cement walkway. The walkway is bordered by 4,000 shoes seized from concentration camp prisoners in Majdanek, Poland. Work boots, platform heels, casual flats, sandals, loafers, men's shoes, women's shoes, children's shoes, piled nearly 2 feet deep along the walls of the room. Many days that summer, Angela was assigned to monitor the floor of the permanent exhibition, which included the shoe room. Her role was to assist visitors, answer questions, and provide needed information. She was also there to protect the shoes and other objects. These aging artifacts, especially leather shoes, were fragile and sensitive to oils from human skin, camera flashes, and sunlight. Throughout the exhibit, signs and placards instruct visitors to abstain from handling the artifacts. Nevertheless, Angela regularly had to stop people from reaching over the low glass wall to touch the shoes. Over the summer, Angela had become increasingly frustrated. Every single day she could count on a handful of visitors ignoring the museum's instructions and reaching over the barrier, at times triggering the alarm. She decided to change tactics and started explaining to visitors the effects of human oils and the importance of not touching fragile artifacts. These explanations and warnings, however, also went unheeded. Group after group, young and old, tourists from other countries and U.S. citizens would stop and stare and then would inevitably reach and touch the shoes. Near the end of the summer, Angela started to speak quite curtly to visitors. Please keep your arms and hands away from the glass barriers. There is an alarm and we can't touch the shoes. And people nodded their heads. They appeared to be listening, yet as if in a trance, they would stop. They would stare. And they would reach. During the last week of her internship, Angela was assigned to spend the day working at the museum's warehouse to assist an associate with cleaning and organization. They drove out of Washington, D.C. to a nondescript metal-sheeted building in rural Maryland. They stepped out of the car and walked over to a gray security door. There were no signs, no markings on the door of the building, and once past the outer entrance and security, they entered a large temperature-controlled warehouse lined with wide archival cabinets and bookshelves. According to the museum associate, only about 10% of the artifact collection is on display at the museum. Most of the artifacts are stored in the warehouse. Angela's co-worker led her down the aisle of cabinets, stopping to open drawers filled with photographs, diaries, clothing, and sacred objects, all donated to the museum by families who suffered from the Holocaust. At one point, Angela opened a drawer labeled Lily Friedman. Inside was a wedding dress with a remarkable story. 21-year-old Lily Lax was a Holocaust survivor. At the end of the war, she was sent with her sister to a camp for displaced persons in Bergen-Belsen, Germany. While standing in a food distribution line, she met a handsome young man named Ludwig Friedman. Despite the cold, muddy, harsh conditions of the camp, they courted and fell in love. 3 weeks later, Ludwig asked Lily to marry him. Lily's dream was to be married in a white wedding dress. Ludwig took it upon himself to make this dream a reality. Both Lily and Ludwig were refugees without money and possessions. Ludwig began to save his coffee and cigarette rations to use as currency. And one day, a former German air pilot turned up at the camp seeking to trade his parachute for rations. They haggled, and Ludwig exchanged 2 pounds of coffee and a couple of packages of cigarettes for the parachute. He took the white rayon fabric to the women's barracks, and Lily found a seamstress who agreed to make a wedding dress. And on January 1946, 400 refugees walked 15 miles in the snow to the nearest synagogue in the town of Celle, Germany, to attend the wedding. Lily wore her beautiful white wedding gown. Over the next year, Lily's sister and at least 17 other women were married in that same white dress. The museum associate was finishing telling Angela the story and then invited her to ever so carefully touch the dress. Angela stood in silence. Her fingers lightly grazing the airy, delicate wedding dress that represented the newfound hopes of so many young lovers. She tried to feel the weight of those lives, the heartache, the hope, the longing. The associate returned, and together they began to work in another area of the warehouse. At one point, Angela found herself standing next to a drawer labeled shoes. Angela asked permission to look inside. She gripped the handle of this wide metal drawer and slowly rolled it open, but to her surprise, the drawer contained one tiny pair of leather toddler shoes. Angela knew the rules. She had repeated them to museum visitors all summer long. But when she saw those shoes, she reached. She stretched out her arm and reached. So natural, so human, so honest. Who could keep from reaching? College is the time when we figure out who we are called to reach. The hard part is that there's always crowds around us while we're here at college, telling us what to do, what not to do, who to love, who not to love, who to help, who not to help, how to be faithful, how not to be faithful. And we also find ourselves during these 4 years of college falling into silos, keeping ourselves from seeing the needs of those around us, forgetting that the call to compassion is all around us. Despite the college crowds that may be telling us to keep on walking, nothing to see over there. But if we are going to follow Jesus, we must follow with compassion. We cannot use our youth, or being in college as a crutch to not look towards the margins where people need to feel the compassion of Jesus. We must emulate Christ if we are to say we are following him. We must follow the one who leaves the crowd, follow the one who approaches those on the margins, approaches the ones whom the crowd believes are sinners, get to know their story. Touch their eyes. Touch their hands. Touch their hearts, or the dress, or the shoes. You see, friends, the crowd says, be silent, keep walking, ignore them, stay away. But Jesus says, who can keep from reaching?